Good morning, everybody. The discussions that we have witnessed and participated have a common theme. And so as I prepared last night for this discussion, everything that I prepared says that I was totally thinking correctly as every speaker who has blessed us with their information at this podium has covered the most important part of this. And the title of this particular panel discussion is to be Educating Citizens About Violence Prevention. If you will remember, the first panel talked a lot about prevention, and they talked about even flipping what their discussion was from the pathways that lead to violence to the pathways that lead to peace, which is prevention. The second panel focused almost 100% on prevention. So prevention is absolutely a very important part of the discussion that we are engaging in as we try to figure out how to tackle the question of violence. I'm from Chicago, and Dr. Myers wanted me to say that. I don't know why. Maybe it's because Chicago is being ravaged with some of the worst violence that we've seen in a long time. But I remember a discussion that one of our police commanders had as he was conducting a community meeting on the west side of Chicago, and we were doing what we do, hooping and hollering and clowning. We were complaining, we were having at it. And then he got to a point where he could no longer take it, and he stood up and he said, "Everybody stop, 1 minute." And he shared with us, he says, "Guys, I cannot stand here and subscribe to the spaceship concept with you all. You all is talking about the crimes and the things that are happening in neighborhoods as though a spaceship landed and dropped some Martians off." He said, "People, there were no spaceships. There are no Martians. Those are your children." And so as he challenged us to make sure that we stay true to ourselves as we're figuring out how to fix this problem, I'm going to challenge the panelists that I'm just delighted to introduce to you to focus with us a little bit on how you re-engage the community, because the community has to become the new version of home. Home has changed. Home is not what you and I knew. It is very different. So I'm going to challenge our panelists to address community as the home that helps us with prevention. To that end, it is my pleasure to introduce to you first Ms. Moderator Bryant. Can you stand for me? Oh, very good. Ms. Bryant is the Assistant Chief of Operations for the Pittsburgh Office of Police. She's a 37-year veteran of the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police and has served in a supervisory capacity for over 20 years. Ms. Bryant has been a facilitator for the Moms and Cops programs, a domestic violence program, and Chief Bryant has received numerous law enforcement and community service awards throughout her career. Most recently, she's being recognized as a 2013 Athena Award finalist. Everybody, please give a round of applause to Chief Bryant. I'm going to introduce the second panelist and bring him up, and then we'll let them get started. The second panelist that it is my pleasure to introduce to you is Imam Talib Sharif. He's been retired from the U.S. Air Force for 30 years. He co-founded the Muslim Minority Members Organization, which was instrumental in opening the doors for the first minority Islamic chaplain. He was also the only Muslim speaker at the city of Augusta's first 2011 commemoration program. He's the first to serve for 30 years. He was the first to serve for 30 years military service as an active Muslim, and then the first to become a full-time a mom after doing so. Please give a round of applause to our panel for this particular discussion. Please give a round of applause to the panel, please. And I'm going to invite to the mic Chief Bryant.
Thank you. If I can sit right here. Okay. Good afternoon. I speak to you today from my experience both professionally and personally. As parents, teachers, and concerned adults, we have to teach our children to think beyond the moment and help them understand that for every choice there is a consequence. We as parents give our children the essence of their being, but their future is oftentimes shaped by environmental circumstances and outside influences. On a daily basis, you read about the violence in our neighborhoods, and you see how drugs, alcohol, and mental illness have taken a toll on the family structure. I listen to countless people placing the blame for this culture of violence on everything from social, economic conditions to the entertainment industry. But I haven't heard anyone talk much about the makeup of the individual. How did they get that way? How do you get a beautiful, bouncing baby boy years later to grow up to be carrying an AK-47 and spraying a neighborhood? How did they get that way? There is a multitude of contributing factors that cause young people to take to a life of crime. But from my experience, it's the existing culture derived from exposure to negativity and despair that drives our youth into a life of crime and violence. We must change the culture, as that has been a theme throughout this morning. We have to change the culture and give young people hope for a better future. I strongly believe that what is taught and learned in the home during the early stages of development is what gives our children the tools to combat or succumb to the negative influences that are so abundant in today's society. There are some children that come from dysfunctional homes where their parents or guardians are mentally disabled or victims of drug and alcohol. These children really have to struggle hard to succeed in life because they start off with a disadvantage. It is more acceptable for us to understand why a child growing up under these circumstances turns out bad, because one would surmise they were raised in survival mode. But I've seen many of these children overcome the disadvantages and rise to become productive young adults through sheer determination, willpower, and the help of an extended family member or a concerned adult. What is becoming more prevalent today and is more difficult for us to understand is why the child who comes from a good home turns to a life of crime and violence, especially when their loving parents have provided all the essentials for their development. The problem is sometimes we work so hard at providing the material things that we miss out on providing the old-fashioned morals and values that strengthens character. That's what's missing, character. We want our children to have a better life than what we had. We want them to have more. So we work harder to give them more material things. In doing so, we sometimes cripple them. You know the old saying, black women love their sons and raise their daughters? We probably could have a healthy debate on that subject, but I've experienced it firsthand that many do. What children really need more than material things is our spiritual and parental guidance coupled with quality time. Quality time is when you're sitting down doing the homework with them, when you have dinner on the table, when you go up to school unexpectedly just to see how they're doing. That's kind of quality time. When you take them out to different events and show up at their school events. Believe it or not, children want and need direction and discipline in their lives. The young people who are involved in the violent criminal activity today are driven by the love of money and what they think it will buy for them, along with the attention or respect in the streets that the so-called gangster-style life generates. And what they don't understand is that that gangster lifestyle is a marketing strategy. It's a marketing strategy, and they get caught up in it. Many have no regard for the sanctity of human life or the effect that they have on their families and communities, as long as their self-serving needs are being met. Like in the film On Second Thought, Kim's mother looks like she works her butt off to give Kim and her grandchild everything they need. But Kim doesn't appreciate her mother's struggles. She takes her for granted. Many young people live for today without fearing the repercussions for their actions. The possibility of incarceration or death seem to be a consequence for somebody else. To help redirect our children and keep them on the right track, as parents, we need to constantly ask the when, where, why, and who questions, because no matter what control you have over your household, once your child is in the street, you don't have the same control. You have to sometimes show that tough love and be the parent, not the best friend. A lot of parents today want to be their child's friend when what they really need is a parent. I truly believe that if a good spiritual and moral foundation is laid, it will give children a fighting chance. Even if they stray off track because there's outside influences, a solid foundation, continued love and support and prayer will eventually put them back on the right road. A lot of older people feel that all you need is prayer. You know, I'm praying on it. But you need action too. You need action with that prayer. It is important to constantly remind children to say thank you, to be appreciative, to love themselves and others. We must constantly remind them that in life, you reap what you sow, and that everything that glitters isn't gold. Our children are the future, but they are impressionable and easily swayed. So it is our responsibility to protect them and give them the tools that they need to succeed in life. And when I say I speak to you personally, I have 2 daughters, 4 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. My 15-year-old grandson keeps me on my knees because I know the challenges and temptations meeting him when he walks out the door are unimaginable. I know that with every fiber of my being, I have to constantly encourage him, motivate him, teach him, and help him to see that he has a bright future, because I don't want to bury him and I don't want to visit him in jail. I not only feel this way about mine, but I feel that way about yours. We can never give up on our children because they are our future and they need us now more than ever in order to make it. When I talk about teaching them, one of the most important lessons you can provide is teaching them what to do when they're stopped by the police. Why? Because you want them to have a positive rather than a negative encounter. Police officers don't put on that uniform to get hurt. They are trained to defend themselves and you. I would strongly recommend parents and teachers to attend the citizen police academies in your city to learn more about what the police can do and what they can't do, so that you can better educate your children. There are 56 Noble chapters across the United States that teach a program called The Law on You. Noble is a national organization of Black law enforcement executives. Contact the national office. The phone number is 703-658-1529 to find a chapter in your local area who can come out and present the Law on You program for your community or youth group. Whatever led to the death of Michael Brown and the injuries to the police officer in Ferguson, Missouri, should not have happened. Whatever led to Leon Ford, a young man being shot and paralyzed, or a traffic stop where Morgan Jenkins, a police officer, was shot and paralyzed after a traffic stop in my city, should not have happened. Additional training on the part of police departments and raising the level of awareness on the part of the public is necessary so that we can coexist and prevent tragedies like what occurred in Ferguson and in Pittsburgh. I applaud the Black Women for Positive Change because they not only talk about the problems, but they've taken action steps toward finding a solution. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And that is, we always invoke God to help us. We need God to help to deal with what we're dealing with here. Very, very important topic. I'm very pleased to be here. I signed on. In fact, I was sold with the Black Women for Positive Change, I think last year when I first came to know of them and get involved and connect with their works. I see that's the core to get the energy going because really they represent mother, you know. And in fact, in almost every word that depicts the woman, you have the masculine part there. For instance, we know we have woman. In woman is what? The word man. Woman, you have men. In the word she, you have what? You have he. In the word Mrs., you have what? Mr. In female, there's male, right? In the word madam, what's in madam? Adam, right? Now Adam came from mother what? Mother Nature, isn't it? He came from Mother Nature. He came from the earth. You know, we created from dust. So, thank you. So I've always seen that significant help can come from this effort that's starting right now from mothers, just looking at the nature of things. And then we go back to speak to prevention. I've been using this analogy, being a man of faith, that Scripture gives us. And we know Scripture we're introduced to the universe before it's in its present form. And the Scriptures, all the Scriptures, by the way, of the heavenly religions, they speak to the state of things was in a state of violent commotion. This is one of the languages that's in Scripture. Unrest, smoke, unchecked, etc. These different terms, and it said that God did not want it to stay like that. So He called to it to come together willingly or unwillingly. And the Scripture tells us that the creation responded, we come willingly. And it says that when unity and order had come to that body, and each piece in orbit was given its attention, that there was peace in the heavens. So we look at that, and first of all, the wise people that are wise, and there are many that are here, and the person who is reflective of his soul, his abstract, he says to himself or herself that if God can bring peace to that massive body, certainly He can bring peace to me. He can bring peace to our world. And then we know, as in the prayers, it says, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So everything took that lead. And when we look at now human life, we come from Adam. And that's our common life. That's our common identity, coming from Adam. And we come here attached to human beings. No one comes here in a vacuum. So this is important for us in terms of how to stabilize it. We're attached, and someone is there because we're weak. Strength takes care of weakness. It tells us how strength is supposed to help those that can't help themselves. And then now we look at how life progresses. Children, they come here, they don't come here violent. They don't come here criminals. They don't come here wanting to be in gangs. They don't come here looking for gangs. They don't come here lying. They don't come here stealing. They don't come here cheating. They don't have that nature because they're not created like that. That's not the nature that God gave us as human beings. But what happens is, over time, you know, one of the things I was saying, I was in an interview with some of my great colleagues here with the Black Women for Positive Change, and I made a statement. Yes, it takes a village to raise a child. So if the child is acting up, that means there must be something wrong with the village. Okay, so that takes it back there. So let's look back now in terms of where it starts. And in order for us to prevent it, yes, we certainly know that the home is nowhere what it used to be. But that's where it has to stop, because really you're saying families, homes are coming together to form these bigger bodies to put a check on things. But in the home, this is what happens. Just like the heavenly bodies, they needed attention. Everything has to have attention. Life was given attention when it comes here. It has something attending to it. The child begins to, on the creative energies that God gave it in terms of seeking positive and to expound the positiveness in itself and its good, it begins to come home and speak to the parent, first in the house, to share things that it's doing. They want to be helpful. And then what happens is that parent begins to sometimes ignore that child. Okay, so look at how it happens. The child begins to say, okay, if I can't get your attention by peaceful means, so now they begin to, so this is how God created us too, that now they begin to act out. They begin to make noise. They begin to slam things. They begin to throw things. To really, what they really want is attention, you know. And I have a story. I'll share this story with you. I got a piece. I have a violent piece in my own history, and then with my own children, and which really propelled me to get involved in this arena. I was born in New York, in Manhattan, New York. My mother was married, and her husband was violently killed. And she told me about this when I became a teenager, about his death, and I was maybe about 4 years old when this happened. So, but she told me about that, and she moved the family to North Carolina, and she remarried. And when she remarried, this person that she remarried, apparently he began to become deranged or whatever, and he tried to kill her. Now, I'm small, obviously. Seeing him, you know, the domestic violence is a piece that I was exposed to. And I couldn't do anything. I was too young. You know, I'd jump on his back, do anything I could, but I couldn't do anything to stop him from hurting her. And so one day it got real bad, and she just had to leave home because he was threatening her real seriously. And I think I may have been 6 at the time. And we went, her mother didn't live far from there, and so she took us, and it was me and my sister at the time, to her mother's home. And I remember being there, and all of a sudden, there's a big crash comes through the window. And that's her husband, and he has a rifle. And I guess he was casing, he saw her in the living room area, and he wanted to kill her, but he wanted to get close, so he crashed through the window, the kind of thing you might see on a television scene or something, and that some people may see in some of our cities. And he was getting ready to shoot my mother. He put the rifle on her, and my uncle. Now I mentioned this piece because this is an important piece too, particularly in light of what the president is doing in terms of my brother's keeper. When my father was killed, I didn't have a model, a model anymore. So when we moved to North Carolina, this uncle, he was about 16 at the time. And this is something that he became my model. All human life looks for models. That's why we always try to have something excellent for people to look at to see what their excellence is. And but my uncle, as a teenager, he just responded, and he went right towards her husband, and he got there just in time. I mean, it was instant. He didn't hesitate anything, and he pushed the rifle down. And so he shot my mother in the leg instead. And so I always remembered that, and I love this uncle. He's in North Carolina right now. I love him. In fact, he went in the military. He was in Vietnam. He came out. He got involved in the Black Panthers. Then he got involved in the original Nation of Islam, and then it went from that small circle of self and nationalism to the big circle of humanity and universals, which is where we are now. And I was with him. I was along with him. And he helped me get to the stage that I'm at now. So that's what led me into the military too, looking at his paths and the other things. So one of the things he was also involved in, he was involved in martial arts. Obviously, when you're a part of the nation, we all know Malcolm's history. And I'm over the community now that Malcolm, he actually put a lot of money into building, and he used to serve as a leader there, called the Nation's Mosque here in Washington, D.C., 77-year-old community. But then I got involved in martial arts to see how, and it taught me how to use power. You know, like I told you, power should help those that can't help themselves, should help the weak. And you begin to respect power, because also in the military it's a similar thing, to help restore the peace. But being taking this now to just the military piece, I spent 30 years in the military. My children were in private schools and military schools. And so I left overseas in 1992 to return to the States with my children. And we after that, we have 3 children, just to share this with you as well. And then my wife and I, we adopted 3 children, and they had and that was a big challenge for us as well. And then we fostered a whole lot of children too. And I was always involved in trying to help work with children. But when we got to Denver, this assignment took me from overseas to Denver, Colorado. Now, Denver, Colorado at that time, if you look at their history, they didn't have a lot of gang violence before 92, but we got there right when this thing started hitting up. A lot of the families were leaving California, trying to get their children out of those environments, the gang violence, et cetera, and moving to Colorado. And we got there right when this thing was spinning up, and had gotten really, really bad. And the same kind of thing that what Dr. Marshall, I think what he said earlier, they took them out of the environment, but the environment didn't get out of them. So they got there and caught it in Denver. They started flashing signs, writing on the bus stops, trying to see who else was there that identifies with their quote-unquote sets, et cetera. And we ended up moving. We thought it was a nice neighborhood, which really it looks in terms of housing and everything, but it ended up being a Crip neighborhood. So my children ended up going to a school that was dominated really mainly by Crips, but there were Bloods there too. So it was heavily gang infested at the time. Now this is 92. Now my children, like we again, I've given you their environment, and I've trained them. They've been skilled in how to take care of themselves and how to use power. I was teaching them martial arts since they were 4 as well. And my oldest daughter, she may have been maybe 15, 16 at the time. So they went to high school. Her and my younger daughter were in high school. And so she came to me about 6 months after us having been in Denver. And she said, Daddy, I feel myself changing. Now, if you were to meet my daughter, you would never believe she can do anything to hurt anybody. I mean, very, very humble, very soft-spoken. But she's always been this way. And but she came to me and she said, Daddy, I feel myself changing. She said, I don't want to change, but I have to. And she left it at that. And I knew what she was talking about, because but the community at that time, the religious community, not even mention the city, but even the religious community that we were part of, was not really doing things to help the situation. So that put pressure on me as a father now, coming back, and then my younger daughter came home, and she had gang signs written on her, and I came to find out later that meant that she was being recruited. I didn't know now that shortly before that, my older daughter had already been recruited and beaten and everything, but I found that out later. So I really had to get involved. So I started getting with people who think like this group, bringing minds together that think alike. It's a few of us started. And then we began to look at what can we do. So we began to do things. Obviously, we got with the mayor, and then we started seeing things come out of the mayor's office, like youth summits for the mayor. We eventually got my daughter involved in that. But we started this thing called Stop the Violence. And initially, we started going into the community. And again, this is what we have to do. We have to change it, you have to go into it. You can't stay on the outside and think it's going to be changed. We have to get into it. So we started going into the community, and we found active Crips, active Bloods who were willing to participate in what we were trying to do. And this is what we were trying to do at first. We said, we have to elevate. And I want to come back to this point, but let me mention this point. Do I have time for a minute to tell this one story? Before I retired from the military, I had spent some time with one of the Tuskegee Airmen. We had a program, one of the Tuskegee Airmen, and we at lunch we had a roundtable discussion, and we were talking about what they accomplished, the Tuskegee Airmen, what they accomplished, and then it came up how the age of some of them. Some of them were 15, majority, a lot of them 15, 16, years old. And looking at what they were doing to be so young and to have inferior equipment, inferior training circumstances, facilities, but then to perform superiorly over those that had superior stuff. And I said, while at that table, I said to him, I said, and everybody, I said, wow. And it's like in a question. I said, that shows us the potential in our young people. You know, the 15-year-olds can perform like that. And I said, that's the potential that our young people have today in terms of excellence. And he immediately said, no, it doesn't. And so the miles dropped at the table, and we wanted to know why he felt the way he said, because he said back then, and we can go look at the time and look at where we are now. We're experiencing something now that we've never experienced in our history before, but back then we didn't have this kind of violence in our communities. But he said back then, we were conscious. He said in order for our young folks, our youth, to have that same level of potential to be maximized, we have to elevate the consciousness to ourselves. So that's what we tried to do with this stop the violence. We wanted to elevate the consciousness of the people and the youth involved, so we took them into the studio. I worked with the cable company. We did a program, and it was called Stop the Violence, and we had active Crips, active Bloods, and then we had those who had managed to get out by way of religion or some other thing, to get out of the gangs without having problems. And then again, having protection, as the doctor said, the environment has to protect them. So in everything that we asked them, we had each one of them in the studio individually, those who are active and those who are past. And every single thing that each one of them said was something that they should have been getting from the home. The attention, the time, the love, the care, the protection, every single one of them. And none of them really wanted to be involved in that. It's because of the pressures of what that environment offered for them and that they wasn't getting from the home. I guess time is getting me now, so we'll taper off right there.
Okay, we've heard a lot of thoughts and information. I'd like for you all to give the panel a round of applause real quickly for the information that they shared. As we listen to Chief Bryant, we heard very clearly the message that there's a need to pay attention to the home. There's a need to pay attention to individual character. And a while back, individual character was developed in your home in partnership with your school and your church, but with the home being the primary focus of developing individual character. We heard Amin Sharif talk a lot about children's nature, talk about mothering, talking about how people don't come here as a developed person. There are things in your environment that help you develop. And so all of those things together are still telling us that there's a need for a real refocusing of our family, and our communities if we're going to be effective at this. It's kind of like the concept of learning how to get home. In Chicago, I know that where we spent lots of time with my brothers and everybody was teaching us how to get home. And a part of the teaching us how to get home was absolutely how you interact with the law, to make sure that we were told that if you can be smart enough to get home, we can fix almost anything. But while you're out there facing things that could not be projected for you, you just got to be thinking. And that's what the teaching of the home, that's the importance of being taught something in home. You get prepared to be protected. So nobody can project all of the things that we might face. A crazy cop with a trigger finger, we cannot project those things, but we can prepare our children and our families as best we can. So I'd like to open it up for questions now for our panels, and you can use either one of the microphones on the side. But while you're coming, I want to acknowledge on behalf of the Black Women for Positive Change, I want to acknowledge a very, very strong column that Amin Sharif published yesterday in the newspaper addressing the senseless beheading of the American citizen. And maybe he'll tell you where you can find that article, but on behalf of Black Women for Positive Change, we want to commend you for having the wherewithal to take such a strong stance on that issue.
And if you're looking for that, all you have to do is go on to our Twitter page. So, or just search for #NV and you will find a link to that statement.
Thank you.
Good evening. I want to thank both the panelists for coming through. As somebody in the field, I'm always looking for answers, even though I've been at this game for quite some time. I want to really thank you, Police Chief and Imam, for coming through. I spent some time in Pittsburgh, law school up at Duquesne. You're familiar with that. I want to ask you, you said you need to show the kids what they need to do when they get stopped by the cops. I got stopped by the cops in Pittsburgh, but it ended up okay. I was driving in a bus lane. Foreign tags.
You would have got stopped.
I got stopped. This was several years ago, but it was real interesting. He stopped me. First thing I thought about was foreign tags. That's probably why he stopped me. I had DC tags. Pulled me over, and I know to go over to the right or whatever, and I stopped immediately. And I also knew what to say. 2 cops coming from Washington, D.C., and because I've got pulled over several times. And he walked up to me and said, I need to get your driver's license and registration. First thing I said is my driver's license, and my registration is in the glove compartment, and I pointed over there. And I said, but my driver's license is in my back pocket. So I'll be reaching, sir, to get that in a few minutes after I get my registration. So I got my registration, then I reached in, and I gave him 2 forms of ID, the driver's license, and I was trying to find another one. I couldn't find it, but I gave him this one inadvertently. It was Duquesne Law School ID. Gave that to him. He immediately looked at me, didn't even bother to go back to his location to check on me. He said, follow me, sir. I'm going to get back in my car, and I'm going to escort you out of here. I pulled you over because you were in a bike lane. And he took me throughout the rest of the city. We didn't have bike lanes in, driving, bus lanes, bus lanes. We didn't have that in D.C., but we have it now. A few years ago, we didn't have it. So I want you to answer that question. What do you do when you get stopped? Share that with the people as an expert. And of course, I want you to finish that story about your daughter who comes home with gang signs. How did that end up? How did you deprogram her? Because I need to hear that also. Thank you all so much.
Okay, what to do when you're stopped by the police in the situation that you just discussed from a traffic stop, you did exactly the right thing. A lot of times, prior to the stop, the police officer is always observant. The police officer is always suspicious. They don't know who is in the vehicle that they're stopping, so they're always on alert, on guard. A lot of times, our young people they hide their wallets underneath the seat, or they in the glove compartment, and they start reaching or shifting around even before the officer comes to the car. That puts them on automatic alert. What I tell young people all the time is, whoever's in the vehicle with you, tell them to shut their mouth, and you do the talking. Because a lot of times the friends will, keep things going and cause everybody to get out the car and be searched. But if you ever had home training, that's the time to have it. When you're on the street, when you're by yourself, when you're stopped by the police, that's when you say, yes, sir, no, ma'am. It may bother you, but sometimes A yes, sir, a no, ma'am will get you on your way without any issue, without any problem. It's when you have a lot of attitude, you know, why are you stopping me? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you getting people that's killing people down the street or whatever? You know what I mean? When you have a lot of attitude, that's when, you know, the officers, they start checking more things. They're checking the car, they're checking more things, you know what I mean? When all you want to do is whatever that encounter was, a traffic stop, the only thing that should happen with a traffic stop, you get a warning, or you get a ticket, or your vehicle's towed, or you're arrested. Nothing more should happen out of that, but really what you want is a warning, slow down, see you later, or whatever.
Can they just walk up to you arbitrarily and say, excuse me, come here, sir, or, you know, I want to talk to you. Can you walk away? How do you approach that? You know, what are your rights from that point?
Yes, an officer can walk up to you and say, where you headed to, what's your name, or whatever. You cannot answer, which would raise their level of suspicion, but rightfully, you don't have to answer. You don't have to say where you're going, but it would be to your benefit to say, my name is whatever and I'm going wherever. You know, you can make things easier, you can make them more difficult for yourself. But just like when you're in a car, when they say, can I search your vehicle? You don't have to let an officer search your vehicle, but an officer can search your vehicle if they have reasonable suspicion that they can articulate or they have probable cause. And when I say, when they're reaching down under the seat, that's reasonable suspicion to think that there's something under there that can hurt them. So a lot of times officers will say, do you have anything in your vehicle that can a weapon in your vehicle or anything that in your vehicle that can hurt me? You know, they may ask you that. Some people say, well, I have a gun in here or I have whatever. And some people say no. But they cannot arbitrarily search your vehicle without your permission unless they have reasonable suspicion that they can articulate.
And what I'm going to do now
Chief.
is I'm going to give Amim Sharif a very quick opportunity to close out his story, quick, and then we'll take one more question, and then we're going to wrap this session up. Thank you for your questions, too.
Okay, bottom line, we did end up going to court a couple of times with my girls because of some of the violent stuff that was happening. We had to make the community healthy, and we turned them around by this. Strengthening the community, the school, obviously, because what she was saying was this environment that's not protecting me. I gotta fight and take care of myself. And so we changed it around by the community we were living in, the city, the mayor got real strong with the youth summits, and we got my daughters to participate in those, and also to volunteer to help out at domestic violence places and stuff like that. And all that, the sensitivity came back with that piece, because she was, I mean, obviously we had a good relationship for her to share that with me, to tell you got to be connected to your children. But the other part, I couldn't protect her, was that school environment, and eventually we had to work with them to get them to enhance that to where they feel protected and not feel that they have to be a part of those systems, et cetera.
Very good.
But they're healthy. She's got seven. I guess she's been married now for maybe, I think, 12 years, 4 kids later, et cetera, doing very good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. Last question.
Yes, Chief Bryan, I was in Pittsburgh at the press conference with Black Women for Positive Change, and you came in your uniform. You look so different today. But the point is that you were among the people when you walked in the building. People wanted to come to you, want to be surrounded you with such a peaceful, calming presence. In Ferguson, do you have any kind of thoughts, maybe I missed it if you already addressed it, of what kind of training should police chiefs have? Is there some kind of school they can go to so that they can come across as human beings? You know, what can they do?
One of the problems in many cities is that police chiefs wait until there's a problem to really try to reach out to the community for solutions. You can't. You have to have a relationship with the community, and across various cities, a lot of the violent activity, whether we like to hear it or not, occurs in minority communities. So police chiefs, whatever color they are, nationality or whatever, they have to have a relationship with the community so that when a problem occurs, they can gather a group of concerned adults within that community to help calm or ease a situation before it gets out of hand. There's a lot of training, and in Noble we have some training. Noble was one of the first organizations that introduced community policing. Community policing is a philosophy that should be throughout police departments. And it's not adopted all the time, but you have to have a relationship with the community. That's what's needed in Ferguson. And I know there's a lot of people who've gone down there to help address the issue.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for allowing me to stand in on behalf of Bernadette Tolson, who's not feeling very well today, but it was absolutely my pleasure to do so. Thank you guys.